Ellen Madison's ancestors, the Burdicks and the Saunders, settled in Dunn's Corners. They had a close connection to the land, which her grandmother named Sunny Acres. This is where Ellen still lives today, 4 generations later. She remembers her grandparents growing up and the old farmhouse which never had running water, plumbing, electricity, or a telephone. This is her story.
Good morning, Tom Galuscio here, President of the Westerly Historical Society, with our ongoing episodes of Reflections, an oral history project sponsored by the Westerly Historical Society. And this morning, I have the sincere pleasure of introducing a longtime friend, Mrs. Ellen Madison. Good morning, Ellen.
And thank you for inviting me to
It's our pleasure.
in this.
So, tell us, how did Ellen Madison come to be?
Well, Ellen Madison is a descendant of many of the early settlers in Westerly. The Babcocks, which you may have heard of.
Sure.
First European settler to come to Westerly from Newport, came to Westerly in about 1660. And I come down from the Babcocks on my dad's side. And it was about 3 generations ago when the Barnes family lost the name of Babcock. But I am the 13th generation from the Babcocks. Tobias Saunders came to Westerly in 1661 as a shareholder in the Misquamicut Purchase. I am the 10th generation of Saunders. My mother was a Saunders.
Wow.
So I have that. Robert Burdick came as a shareholder in the Misquamicut Purchase, and I am the 10th generation from the Burdicks coming down.
Oh, my goodness.
And you'll be very happy to know that I'm not going back to the Crandalls and the Gavetts and everybody else, because those are other lines, whereas these are much more direct lines.
Wow.
The only one who didn't come to Westerly was on my dad's side. His mother's side came down from the Babcocks, but his dad's side came from Henrik Hans Mattison, Matteson, and they came in 1660 to Rhode Island, but settled in the East Greenwich area. So I think I'm certifiably Westerly.
I think so.
But I'm here today to talk about Dunn's Corners.
Yeah, what was it like growing up in Dunn's Corners?
Wonderful. It was a completely different life from the kids that grew up in Westerly proper. I didn't go to Y dances. I didn't go to Vars and sit on the soda fountain. I didn't go to football games because they were on Saturdays, and all of those required transportation. And that was tough. You know, parents were working, they didn't take time out to go to their kids' activities. And for example, when I was co-editor of the yearbook, Saul Steiner, who was one of the teachers and the advisor to the yearbook, would bring me home because my parents couldn't come and get me. And he was a Providence Journal reporter, so we'd go downtown in his Volkswagen and park in front of the Washington Trust, and he would go in and do his reporting and then come back and bring me home.
I remember Saul.
But my life was in Dunn's Corners because of that limited transportation. So let's start with Dunn's Corners.
Sure, you must have made some interesting activities, or kept yourself entertained.
So geographically, I want to focus right on Dunn's Corners itself, the 4 corners. And we'll start where, I hate to be a Rhode Islander and say where such and such was. It used to be, but Benny's used to be on that corner. And when my mother was growing up, and when I remember, Mrs. Sheffield Green lived in a big yellow house on that corner with wonderful yuccas in front of it. She was my mother's teacher at the Dunn's Corners School, which was across the street. And she made the best peanut butter fudge. We couldn't wait as kids until she made that peanut butter fudge. That section was, her house was torn down, and John R. Ford built the building that's still the Benny's building. After that, a medical research records company came in, and finally Benny's. And now it's vacant, which is too bad.
Kind of sad.
Across what we used to know as District Number 6 Road, which is now the Bradford Duns Corners Road, was the Blue Moon Tea Room. And it was a tea room. We didn't go there very often because we really weren't tea room people. But my father's family, the Barnes and the Duhamels, owned it. So maybe we'd go out for one nice meal in the, in the course of the year.
Okay.
Behind that, before I was born, was my father's radio service station. And he repaired radios in the 30s. Later, that building, which was small, was moved to Langworthy Road, and my grandparents, Madison, lived in that house. And it's very hard to locate now. It's either been torn down or it's been built over because it was small.
Okay.
Next to that was the church, which was, when I was growing up, was a Seventh-day Baptist church. And when I was growing up, it was the home of the Dower family. She was a Duhamel Barnes. They're all interrelated, yes. Yeah. And then it became Westerly Furniture, and now it's torn down, and there's that mini mall there. Yep. And then we come to Charlie's. And Charlie's was, in many ways, my home away from home. Red fountain stools, that you could twirl around on as a kid. There was a long lunch counter. There was also a place off to the left where you could sit at tables, but we never sat at tables. We sat on the stools. And Charlie Green and his wife Esther owned Charlie's. It was hamburgers, hot dogs, red soda, which I consumed more than my share of as a kid. And that was really where the local people went. He hired a lot of my friends to work there as waitresses. He was very concerned with the neighborhood. And people will tell the story about the cat that lived there and walked across the grill. Never bothered us in the least. It was just part of the ambiance, and Charlie would be covered with grease and everything. It was just wonderful. But you knew people there. And the only person that I really remember coming from somewhere else was Sally Coy. And she was the librarian at the public library downtown. She was of a different social caliber. So we were very honored that she would come to Charlie's to eat. So that was a real loss to me when Charlie's left. Across the street, across the post road where the realty company is now, was Crossroads. I did not eat in Crossroads until I was an adult. That's the difference.
Okay.
And it was a clean, more upscale diner than Charlie's, yeah. But I didn't know anybody there. Okay.
Charlie's felt like at home.
It did. It really did. And I should say that the house I grew up on was just a quarter mile towards Westerly from the corner, so we walked all of those places. When my family went to Charlie's, we drove, and that was the community house. And the community house, when I was growing up, was the school that my mother had attended. It was 2 very large rooms, and it was truly a community house. It was where the fire department was based. The Grange meant there, the 4-H, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts.
Boy Scout troop started
Absolutely.
there. Troop 2 Duns Corners.
Yeah, Boy Scout troops, a knitting group, anybody who wanted a function used that building. It was old wood, it creaked, the floors creaked when you went in. And then the Duns Corners Community Church was based there. So the history of the community church begins when I was a baby. And I was a war baby, so the gas rationing was, of course, taking place. And a lot of the men were away or just coming home from the war. So the people wanted a Sunday school and couldn't afford to go into town. You couldn't use your gas on a Sunday to take your kids to Sunday school. So the Sunday school was started, and met there. And later church services began because they decided that, maybe if you have a Sunday school, you should have a church. But there was a community church. And so ministers from Westerly would come down from different denominations to preach. There wasn't really very much pastoral care, during the week because they had their own churches. But we were exposed to Episcopalian, Congregationalist, Baptist, Methodist. It was a community church. Folding chairs. Finally, there was a pulpit built, and of course all the other organizations used it as well. And then when I was in junior high, I think it was probably then, that they decided that they needed to affiliate with some sort of denomination. And so for over a year, they studied, and I can still remember the paperback book we had. Had a chapter on the Methodists, a chapter on the Presbyterians, a chapter, and would have people come in from those different denominations to speak to them about the structure, basically, of those denominations. And they voted to become Presbyterians. I think, because there were no Presbyterian churches in town, so there wouldn't be any, competition, right? But no money to hire a minister and become really a full-fledged church. I think they were hoping to get money from the Synod and, the National Presbyterian Church. But the first year that they had a minister was in the early 50s, so I'm going back a while here. Joe Peacock came. He was a seminary student at Yale, and he stayed with us. He was from Tennessee, kind of a hick, if you wanted to say that. I mean, that's a nasty thing to say about him. He went on to really become so important in college ministry and in civil rights. But he lived with us on weekends when he came, and later when he was full-time, or more full-time. And that was a wonderful experience for us. When I was 8 years old, I smeared his pristine white shirt with blueberry pie filling. He never let me forget it. Oh. And he remained a friend of the family until he came to my mother's 100th birthday party. He was old, and he traveled and came to her to see her one more time before she died.
Oh, how special.
Yeah, it was. And he brought with him the world to my family. We had a Japanese person from Japan come and stay with us or eat Sunday dinner with us. My first memory of really meeting a black person up close was when he brought somebody from Africa. And I think my parents were probably terrified about what one of us kids might say, and we didn't say anything. And she hadn't told us not to say anything about, can I touch your skin or something like this. And that really became an important part of my life, that part of my exposure.
Worldly education.
Was a good education. The church eventually moved, the community house moved, and the fire department built a new fire station on that corner. And that's what it looks like today.
Oddly enough, the community center moved to the Presbyterian Church.
To the Presbyterian
and
Church.
Still serving.
Right. That's
serving
true.
The community.
Yep, that's very true.
That building has a lot of life. Now it's a preschool.
Yeah, my mother, I don't know how old that building was when my mother went to school, but she would have been there in the 20s. So it's had a life.
Over 100 years old and still going. Yeah. That's wonderful.
So across the street from that was Ed Green's filling station. Ed Green was Mr. Dunn's Corners. I can't begin to sing his praises enough. He had a garage there, and his main industry was digging and contracting and so forth. But he also had the contract for the buses, the school buses. And we always knew the drivers. There was a Champlin, there was Herbie Brown, there was Lolly Podzoline. He came from Tower Street, so he wasn't Dunn's Corners, but he were our school, and once in a while Ed would have to substitute as a bus driver. He, during World War II, would make sure that people like my mother, whose husband was overseas, had their driveways plowed out. He always supported a community activity. His major role was in the fire department. He was the first fire chief, and he remained fire chief until he died on the scene of a fire.
Really?
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Had a heart attack, I think, and his funeral they took him to the cemetery on a fire truck. Wow. I mean, it was so moving. The fire department was a very core part of Dunn's Corners. Ed Green provided a place for young men to go and stay out of trouble as teenagers. They went to the fire department, the older men mentored them, and I know that they saved many young men from getting into trouble. Okay. He included the girls in the annual firemen's dinner, and we served, those long tables, and we just thought we were hot tickets. And I made aprons one year for us all to wear so that they matched, and that photograph of us is Dunn's Corners kids. One of the main events was the carnival.
I do remember the carnival.
You do remember the carnival?
I do. It was
okay.
A great part of the summer.
It was a big part of the summer.
And it was hot and dusty.
And it was the biggest fundraiser that the fire department had. So I still have my purple, and because my mother washed it and the stuffing dyed the white part of the panda bear purple, a panda bear that my dad won at one of the wheels. So the men worked the booths, but Ed found a place for teenage girls. And we worked inside the booths that sold tickets to the rides. Very smart. There was a lot going on there, but the girls were imprisoned in this case. But carnival boys are very attractive. They go around in the summer, working in the carnival, and they'd come over and flirt. They'd get that Ferris wheel going, and then they'd come over and flirt. And the Charlestown Navy base was there, so there were a lot of sailors there as well, in uniform and out of uniform, and a lot of flirting going on. And Ed would make the rounds just to make sure that we were all okay, and I think he would gently kind of move the boys away or the men away from our booths. And, that taught me a lot of responsibility. I had to show up. I had to know how to make change. I had to interact with the people who were coming to the booth. And I was sad when that traveling carnival went away. That was a wonderful week when they were here. One of the favorite stories about Ed Green and the filling station was that he had these big containers of ice cream. Nobody could pack a quart or a pint of ice cream fuller than Ed Green did. He would, the top of the carton wouldn't even hide the ice cream. You got a good deal when you bought ice cream there. And of course, he was oily and dirty from the kind of work he did on trucks and bulldozers and everything else that he had. Didn't bother any of us a bit. And you could get an ice cream cone, which involved him holding the ice cream cone. It was wonderful. Penny candy, newspapers, it was like a general store. And every year at Halloween, and you probably remember this.
Yeah, where you going with this?
The dummies would hang from the wire across that Route 1. And
probably one of the few stoplights in the whole town.
It was, and it was just a blinking light when they had the dummies, was a blinking light. And I'm quite sure that the fire trucks had something were helping a little bit when those dummies were hung, and it was a well-kept secret, as to who was actually involved. And I was sad when they put the traffic lights in. I think it got a little more complicated, and they probably would be arrested on state property, something or other. So, but I think that encapsulates what Dunn's Corners meant to the people that were growing up. Yeah. And now you want to know about me, you said.
A little bit, but on Dunn's Corners, that was the four corners, but circling around the perimeter, there were some other businesses. You mentioned Charlie's, and that was Ed's brother.
Yeah.
Okay. Soon, I don't know how soon after, but then Dusty's was there. There was Krebs on the other side, Ashworth's. And anything beyond that other than the Swiss Chalet?
Haversham Inn, yeah, the Swiss Chalet, Haversham Inn. And that is, Joe Kaduri is doing his postcard books on Westerly, and he's used me as the Dunn's Corners consultant. And we go back and forth a little about whether Haversham is really Dunn's Corners, but I argued for him, he wanted it to be part of Dunn's Corners, and I argued for him that the buses picked up kids in that area and brought them in, so the Dunn's Corners bus did. And up District Number 6 Road, there were the farms. Crandall Farm and Freddie's Farm. And
Sarah Farm.
Hard to tell where it ended on the towards Westerly side. I grew up a quarter mile towards Westerly from the Four Corners. And when my father, Albert Madison, who was engaged 2 times before he married my mother, and there was a 10-year difference in them. My mother fell in love with him at Sunday school.
Really?
And when she was, I don't know, 14 or something like that. And had to watch him go through these 2 engagements. And then they started dating when she was older. He used to drive her back and forth to college at Rhode Island College of Education at that time. But he asked my mother when he proposed, did she want a ring or a house? Having watched these 2 other women, she said she would take a house. So he started building the house in, I think, they got married in 1940, and I think that they probably started building the house there. He was a carpenter by trade. He was still repairing radios, but he was working at the Bradford Dyeing Association as a finish carpenter. And his father had been in the construction business. And there was no electricity on Route 1 at that time, but he knew it was coming. And so when he built the house, he wired it for electricity. But the only buildings you could see from my house at that point were, when I was young, when I was up until about 5 or 6 years old, I guess, was Percy's house across Route 1, and you could vaguely see Pine Lodge cabins.
Okay.
And other than that, there was nothing until you got to really Champlin's store, if you were heading towards Dunn's Corners. So it was a relatively isolated place at that point. The edge of our yard marked the beginning of the wilderness, and you went all the way down to the Shore Road. And of course, when the baby boomers started having babies, there was a lot of building, and so North Stewart Street and all of those became populated with families with kids my age or younger, mostly younger. So that whole area is completely changed. There were fires that used to start down on the Shore Road and come up to the edge of our yard, and I can remember my dad being out in the yard with a hose, and that's so different now.
I know in the early 60s, Sam Urso donated a parcel of land to the town if they built an elementary school on it.
Yeah.
And that really kicked off the development.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So it was, so my parents, I believe, had been trying to conceive a child for years and had been unsuccessful. When my dad was 36 years old, in 1944, he was drafted because of the war, drafted into the war. Because of his experience in the radio business, he went into the Signal Corps, went to New Jersey, Fort Dix for training. My mother went with him. She I think, assembled radios and wrote instructions for how the men were to use these radios in the field, and if something happened, how they could repair them, on the spot. And then he was shipped out. She came back to Westerly. She was in the house at that point. Discovered she was pregnant. They had never discussed names because they had been, my interpretation is because they had been disappointed in not being able to have a baby. So My mother announced, sent him a letter and said, I'm pregnant. Send me some girls' names and send me some boys' names, and we will, I'll tell you which ones I like and which ones I don't. Well, my father sent a list. They were censored out of every letter, these big black censoring things. And my mother was approaching, giving birth, because the letters took a while to get back and forth. And so she said, send me one girl's name and one boy's name, and that'll be it. So I had a grandmother Elizabeth, a grandmother Emma, and my only aunt was Eloise. They were all E's, so I am Ellen Louise.
Okay.
A nice compromise. Nobody's feelings were hurt. Everybody could think I was named after them, and that was it. And I was born, Olive Champlin, who was the wife of the Champlin that you mentioned in the store, drove my mother to the hospital. And I have a copy of the telegram that went to my dad telling him he was a father, and it was announced from the Eiffel Tower. The signal went out from the Eiffel Tower. The bad side of this is he didn't see me till I was 9 months old. And when he came home, he came in from Japan at that point to the West Coast, took a train across. Being Westerly, somebody saw him, in uniform and said, I'll take you to Dunn's Corners. Drove him to Dunn's Corners and reunited with my mom. But the first words out of his mouth were, where is she? And my mother said, oh, she's sleeping, you can't pick her up. And she regretted that for the rest of her life. But, I like my story, of my birth and so forth. School. Dunn's Corners kids were the kids that were bused. So wherever there was a vacancy in a grade level, the Dunn's Corners kids were the ones that got to fill in. And my brother and sister and I I don't know if we ever overlapped in the same schools. Can you imagine being a PTA mother?
3 different schools.
3 different schools or whatever, yeah. It's crazy. So I started off school at Elm Street School, which is where my grandmother had gone.
Okay.
2 years there, and then they shipped me to Bradford. Best elementary school experience ever.
Really?
Oh, Mrs. Burdick taught me a love of ancient history, but the best part was recess and physical education. We had dangerous playground material. We had metal swings and bars and rings, and we could do anything. And there's a photograph of me climbing the metal swing supports, and in a dress, of course, because you didn't wear pants, so in a dress. And one time my boot got stuck in the mud in the field behind the church. I have no memory of what happened, but Mrs. Burdick would dry our wet woolen gloves and hats and stuff on the radiators in the wintertime, so the whole room smelled of that awful,
wet dogs.
Oh yeah, that wet dog smell. But it was a chance to be a kid. And then in 5th grade, State Street School was going to open, but it wasn't quite ready. So we were shipped back to Elm Street School. And then sometime in the fall, the teacher had us empty our desks of our books, and we carried our books and walked to State Street School.
Oh, wow. It's quite a walk.
And for a little kid carrying all those books. And then there was a vacancy in 6th grade at Tower Street. That was the second year that Tower Street was in existence, and I went to Tower Street. Best thing ever was when you got to junior high, you knew everybody in town except for the kids from Immaculate Conception.
Because
it was
you'd been to every
great,
school.
because you'd been to every school. Now, my brother went to High Street. He went to Chestnut Street. I never hit those 2 schools. But between us, we knew everybody. Yeah, it was great. So I think that ends my school career, unless you have questions.
Well, tell me a little bit about your brother and sister. You haven't touched on that much other than going to school now.
So one of the formative influences in my life, a major influence, was my grandparents. And they lived in a house on land that I now live on, which was about 1.5 miles from where we lived. My aunt, Eloise, my mother's sister, was a live-in maid for the Price family on Elm Street in Westerly, and she had one afternoon a week off and Sundays afternoons off. And she would spend a lot of that time with us. She was an integral part of the Woody Hill experience and life in the farm. She was emotionally connected to that. So we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. And my aunt would take us for the afternoon or whatever and take us to Grandma and Grandpa's house. And I'm a little bit confused about this because on Sunday afternoons our family used to take rides. But I also remember that we spent a lot of Sunday afternoons with my grandparents. And probably my brother and I have a much more vivid picture of that experience than my sister does because she's 8 years younger, Sarah, 8 years younger than I am. But we would eat supper at my grandparents' house, which had no electricity, no running water, even till the end. And my grandmother would cook us boiled eggs, applesauce made from apples that had dropped from their trees. And they had chickens, so it was easy for the boiled eggs. And chocolate pudding for dessert. Uh-huh. Over and over and over again. And we loved it. But it wasn't until I was much older that I realized it was because they had no money to feed us anything else. I bet these are some of my prized possessions, and I bet you don't know what these are.
I didn't until earlier today when you brought them in.
This is a picture of my brother when he was, Bob Madison, when he was about 5 years old, holding a corn crib, and down on the ground is this. And this is what we fed the chickens with, the corn. So both Bob and I remember shelling corn. There was a corn crib on the farm, which had been on stone posts so to keep the mice and the rats out. And my grandfather raised corn and would put the corn cobs, the ears of corn, I should say, in two kind of long bins that ran either side of the corn crib and let it dry. One of our jobs there, of course we loved it, was feeding the chickens. So my grandfather had already done this. So he took in the ears of corn that were dried and took the husks off. And you do that by slicing it, pulling it, that cuts the husks, and then you strip the husks off in one motion, presumably. But then we would sit in front of the stove, which was sometimes fed by briquettes. By that time it had been a wood stove, but it was fed by briquettes. And we would take our thumbs and push it down the ear of corn, removing the kernels. And have you ever tried to remove dried corn kernels, you know, like Indian corn that you hang on their doors? Push that down and collect the corn for the chickens.
With your thumb? With
our thumbs. And looking back on it, I know it was something to keep us busy and feel as though we were contributing and everything else, but it was, and as I said, I don't think my sister has any memory of that. I know she doesn't. But my brother and I certainly do. And we picked blueberries. I would ride my bicycle over to my grandparents and pick blueberries and come home and sell them for 50 cents a quart, wild blueberries, heaping quart, you know. And it was, because there was no indoor plumbing when we spent the night with my aunt at the farmhouse, we had to use the privy. My father, the story goes, is that after the 38 hurricane, one of these privies had washed across the pond, and he rescued it and brought it, they weren't married at that point, but brought it to his future in-laws, and it was a 3-holer. And it was tall, medium, and low. And I'm not sure that I have all the facts correct on that, but it was an elegant privy for where the time it was, yeah. And the other thing that happened during the 38 hurricane was that the corn crib blew off those stone posts, and so I never knew it when it was entirely up on the stone posts. And my grandfather went out during the eye of the storm, not realizing that it was the eye, and got picked up and slammed against the house and broke his leg when that, when it picked up.
The storm renewed, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. My brother and sister and I, Sarah and I had totally different experiences growing up because of the 8-year age difference. My brother has a wonderful memory in terms of being able to recreate and remember things that happened. We all had playmates of the same age when I was growing up, and of course I was a teenager, I mean, my life involved sitting out on the bank of Route 1 and waving to the drag racing people and the sailors as they went by. I mean, stupid stuff. Playing volleyball with Omeda Holks, thinking that, waiting for Brian Bozick to deliver the newspapers so we could chat, shall we say. And my brothers, and I used to play softball or baseball with the boys down the street, Jack Carson and Ray Micklick and Mike Healy and so. But they never let me bat because I was a girl, so I had to play steady catcher. The next generation, 4 years later, with my brother, my parents had a little bit more money. They, I think we had 3 very different experiences growing up in Duns Corners, overlapping just a little bit. But
did you have to go into town much, or was Duns Corners self-sustaining?
It was not self-sustaining. So on Friday nights, we would meet at the library. My dad would get home from the mill, he would shower, and by that time, my mother was back teaching because she went back when my sister went into first grade. And I would walk from State Street or wherever I was, high school, to the library. We'd get our library books and sit in that curved area waiting for my mom and dad to come. And they must have picked up my sister because my sister would be young at that point. And we would all go to the A&P, which was on the corner of Broad and Main Street, do the grocery shopping, and then we would go to China Village for supper.
Oh, wow.
I know. Oh, wow. This was when there was a little more money. And
that was our treat growing up.
Was it too? Yeah.
A couple times a year.
No, we went more than a couple of times. I mean, we'd probably go once a month, maybe.
Yeah.
And did your family always order the same thing?
Dad ordered, so.
Oh, Dad ordered for you.
Dad ordered.
My father always had fish and chips. My mother always had steak and pepper kind of thing. I always had chop suey. I have no idea what the other two had, but I mean, it was like.
That was a treat.
It was a treat, but it was fun, and so that was our night out. And I'm sure that we went into town. We called it uptown and not downtown. I've had to adjust my thinking as an adult. I'm sure we would go uptown for more than that, but you didn't waste a lot of money going in.
Well, certainly for clothing and shoes, you'd have to go into town.
Shoes. Oh my goodness. We would drive to New London or Norwich to go to Sears to get shoes, school shoes. I always got car sick. And it was a once-a-year excursion. But clothing, my mother made all my clothes. My dad worked at the BDA. He got a discount on fabric. And it was either plain, checked, or striped. I mean, it was awful. It wasn't awful.
But no paisley prints at BDA.
There was nothing like the other kids were wearing. And I always felt not ashamed, I mean, different. I can remember one time my father brought home all brown material. One was a solid, one was check, and one was a stripe. My mother made me 3 dresses of the 3 materials, and the collar would be one material, and the bodice another, and the skirt the other, and then she'd mix it up. You know, I had these 3 brown dresses and poodle skirts. Oh my gosh, I wanted a poodle skirt. All the girls had poodle skirts, and we just didn't have the money to do that. So my mother made me a circular skirt, and instead of poodle, which was a very complicated thing to make, she put balloons on it. Do you know what it's like for, you know,
A teenage girl
to wear and I couldn't insult her and not wear it. But everybody else had poodles, and I had balloons. And then, of course, in junior high, by junior high, I was making some of my own clothes. And my first store-bought dress was for, I think it was the junior high 9th grade dance. I had a store-bought dress. I can still see it. But my parents had the right priorities. They wanted us to have an education. And so when I began high school, I had an allowance, probably about $5 a week, which in those days was a lot of money. But I also had to buy all my own stuff. So I had to buy my own glasses, I had to buy my own clothing, I had to tithe to the church, I had to do Girl Scout money. And it was good in the long run that I learned how to budget. Okay. And when I went to college, in fact, I've donated these to the Westerly Historical Society, some of my account books. And when I donated them a while ago, I looked at them. I spent such a heavy percentage on pantyhose when I was in college, because we had to wear skirts. And pantyhose always ran. They always ran, and you had to go out and buy more. So, I don't know. Oh, Girl Scouts, okay. One of the things from Duns Corners was we had a very active Girl Scout troop with Mrs. Burbine, and we used to go camping a lot. So, picture this, elementary school kids making bedrolls out of 3 blankets, putting all of their pajamas or whatever you needed inside the roll, tying it with clothesline, strapping it on your back. Then I walked from my house to the community house, and then we walked to Juanita. Oh, wow. With these bedrolls, and the stuff is falling out of them, the clothesline is chafing our shoulders. I mean, we must have looked hysterical, this long line of kids walking to Juanita. But I loved the camping aspect and the camping troop. And I have no memory of walking back, so I think probably some parents took pity on us and picked us up and brought us home after we had camped.
Fun.
But
good story.
That was fun, yeah.
So, Ellen, you've stayed elusive. You've never
Very
married.
elusive, yes. Very
Tell us,
elusive.
How did you succeed?
I had a series of bad boyfriends, should we put it that way?
That'll do it.
I always wanted to know that. I always knew that I wanted to build a house. I love designing houses and doing things like that. And so in 1972, I started the process of designing the house and building it. And I'll get to your question about being elusive, but this kind of leads up to it. So my mom gave me a part of the farm land to build a house on. So I'm the 4th generation to live on that piece of property. So this is my trip room. So my souvenirs, and I make a book out of each of the countries that I've been to.
Oh, cool.
And so it's much easier than having the pictures on the computer, because I actually will look at them once in a while. So I had to put this room on when I got too many guests to eat in the front room, which was my old dining room. And I decided I would have a hearth cooking fireplace, which I do, and I cook in it In the winter time, we have a
You
lot
do?
of fun. Yeah, and these are my. These are the things that I use.
Oh my gosh.
So I have quite a nice collection of.
So these are all authentic colonial?
Yeah, colonial up to probably 1860, somewhere like that. A couple of new ones, but
Wow.
many of them are antiques.
That's fantastic. So what do you cook?
Anything your heart desires. You can do anything on the fireplace that you can do in the kitchen. It's wonderful. It's really wonderful.
I
Yeah.
love the candles too with the old farm
Yeah, and you
table.
notice that I ran out of these colors, and they're shipping them. Amazon is shipping them on Monday. But I just changed the candles yesterday and realized that I used up stuff. And there's very little electricity in this room, very little light. So you do have to have the candles, and I use them.
Fantastic.
And then in the winter time, we have
Wow.
the shutters that close. And this is a typical Connecticut design rather than a Rhode Island one. In Rhode Island, they used to put them in between they double stud the walls. And I didn't want to do that when I was building this room. So I said, Connecticut's close enough. I'll just borrow their
Wow.
technique. But so in the wintertime, when you have the shutters closed and the fire in the fireplace and the candles, really nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
And then this cage bar, I had to put on when I put the addition on upstairs because they had to put in a steel beam across here to hold the weight of the addition. And this was a lolly column, and it kind of stuck out, you know, in the middle of the room. So I wrapped the cage bar around it and put in things so that the bed and breakfast, you know, so I could get to them easily.
So do you still do the bed and breakfast?
No, I retired from that. 42 years I did that.
Wow.
And I met people from all over the world, and it was a wonderful experience. So I did that while I was teaching, and then a few years after I retired.
How many people would you have at one time?
I could have at the most 15. Seldom did I have that because my mom moved in with me and took 2 of the rooms, and you know, it kept shuffling around. And when I started, I had just 1 room that I rented. So, my very first guest was a professor from Yale, and he used to come and correct papers and stay all day while I was teaching school. And it was really primitive then. I didn't have any finished floors. I didn't have doors. My father was convinced I was having an affair with him. He was mortified, and there wasn't anything going on. But
Oh my gosh.
so, and then my kitchen. And I lived without a kitchen when I first built the house. And my dad put up these temporary shelves that were made out of used lumber. You can still see the paint underneath them. And when I had enough money to do the kitchen, I discovered I liked being able to reach for things and have everything right there
Really?
at
Yeah.
my beck and call. So,
It's a great space, isn't it?
but I do live in the past, don't I?
Yeah, no, that's
I mean, really.
fantastic. It really is.
I really do. But this is a great place because you can see who's coming up the driveway, you know,
Yeah.
at all times.
Right.
So, and this was the original dining room, which I outgrew. This is where I eat now.
Nice.
And if you have just one other person, you know,
Right.
she or he
'Cause
can eat here. But And I do close off the rest of the house in the cold weather. You know, I don't heat the keeping room. I have French doors pocket doors that come out and close, and I don't heat that, and I don't heat the wing.
Do you heat the living room where we were?
Yeah.
Get a shot of that.
Yeah.
So was this part of the original house?
Yes, the original house went from here to the kitchen, including the kitchen in this room. So it was a nice little gambrel roof.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I put the addition.
I mean-
This is my wood closet down here, so I'll fill this up with wood, you know, come fall. So it makes it handy, it keeps it dry, and
So you use this fireplace in the wintertime?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I don't know what's going to happen when I get too old to bring in the wood. But I guess that's what they make young people for.
Yes.
And the fireplace in the old library, if you close those doors, you can sit there and just read, and the fire heats the whole room.
Oh,
It's
that's
really
great.
wonderful. I love where I live. I just love it. I love the topography. I love the design of the house. I'm very, very happy here. But I think I was picky. I didn't date a whole lot as a young adult, and I took a sabbatical to teach at URI and finish up my PhD. And when I came back, there was this handsome man, and everybody knew him at the lunch tables in the faculty room. I thought, who is this guy? And I was with him for 16 years, was putting on an addition to the house. After 16 years, I thought, maybe he could move in. You know, maybe. But I was running a bed and breakfast at that time, so we would go from bedroom to bedroom to bedroom in terms of where I was living, because I kept adding on to the house. So finally I said to him, I'll put an addition on this just for us, and you can move in at the end of the summer. So that was happening. I was putting on this kind of little apartment area, and he called me to say, can you take your mother to the circus? We had tickets for the Big Apple Circus. And I thought, he loves the circus. He's a clown himself, you know, he loves. I said, what's wrong? He says, I don't feel good. Well, bottom line, the conversation kind of stopped midway. I had said, let me, call your parents, get to the hospital, go to the clinic, blah, blah, blah. He hated doctors, he hated clinics. And suddenly the conversation stopped, and I thought, well, that wasn't very polite just to stop talking to me. But we had agreed that I would meet him at Pequot Clinic, and I drove over and he hadn't checked in. So I went, he lived in a really, really tiny one-room apartment, and the door was unlocked, which was very unlike him, and I went upstairs, and he was there on the floor, dead.
Oh.
And
I'm sorry.
51 years old, so he was too young. And I never had the desire to be married or have a relationship after that, because they take so much work.
Yeah, they certainly do.
I had my house, I had my life, I was very happy. I've never regretted not being married. And as far as children were concerned, I had thousands of kids.
As a teacher.
As a teacher, and the age I liked, which was 16 and 17-year-olds. So if that's being elusive, I'd like to think of it as knowing who I am and being independent.
Sure, comfortable with yourself.
Comfortable.
Yes.
Yes.
So after school, where did you land to start your career?
I graduated, the guidance counselor at Westerly High School wanted me to go to some fancy schools, and my mother just informed me that no, if I would have to do all the work to raise the money myself to go to one of these fancy schools. I had always wanted to be a teacher. I mean, I played with my paper dolls in the cellar and taught them, And I didn't care what I taught. It made no, I could have been Latin, phys ed, anything. So my mother said, you want to be a teacher, go to Rhode Island College of Education. And I said, fine. I mean, it was fine. I got the best education there I can ever imagine getting to be a teacher. I started off as a chemistry physics major, little known fact, and got sick. My appendix burst. I was in the hospital the day that John F. Kennedy was shot. And that's another story in itself. But so I missed too much lab work to repeat. It would mean going to school for 5 years, and I knew my parents didn't have that money. They gave me $1,000 a year. The rest was up to me. So I switched majors to being a history major. So then I became an English major. Did my student teaching at Johnston High School when it was on split shifts. That was an experience. But then I didn't feel really prepared to teach English, so I went to New York University, lived in the Bronx for 2 years as a head resident for women, was in charge of the women's dorms there, went to school downtown, got a master's degree, came home, taught for a year in Mystic Junior High, terrible experience, went to Ledyard High School, thought I had gone to heaven, taught the rest of my career there, juniors mostly. Wonderful early principal and family, just heavenly. I loved it until the last couple of years when we had a principal who, and I thought,
I know the type.
I thought, nope. If I love teaching too much to have it completely ruined by one woman, and I was 2 years short of, but I retired, and it was wonderful because Walt, who's my significant other's mom, was dying, and I was able to visit her in the hospital. And the next year, my mom decided to move in with me, and I was that 2003 year, I was able to do both of those things that I wouldn't have been able to do if I had been teaching. And somewhere in the 80s, I went back for my doctorate at URI. I had wanted to go to Yale. Okay. But they required like a 2-year residency program. URI had 1. I could live at home and still be a resident, the whole thing. So I did that. My brother, we were a family of educators. My mother was a teacher. My brother spent his career at the Naval Academy as a civilian English teacher. He's a Melville Scholar, well recognized in his field. My sister took a little bit different route. She was in and out of colleges. She was in that, really era. And she went to about 5 different schools, I think. And then my mother said finally, here's the money. You're on your own, kid. Go to school as you want to. And so she ended up getting a degree that utilized her life experiences in museum education and worked at the University of Massachusetts for most of her career as a counselor in the honors program. So, my dad had dropped out of high school because of sickness. I can't remember if it was scarlet fever or what it was, and never graduated. And the same with my aunt. She had to drop out of high school. So when they were in their 50s, probably, they studied and they got their GEDs. They were both smart people, but what a difference it made in my dad's life, because now he had the credentials. And our house was a gathering house for high school kids, and once we went to college, I sensed that he pulled back, and I think that it was because he was feeling inferior. And once he got his GED,
he slipped right back in.
He was back into the loop.
So nice.
Yeah, it was nice.
The feeling of self-worth is important.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
Really is. So we've talked about Duns Corners in a couple of different variations. Which do you like best? The one you remember as a toddler, a youngster, or your teenage years, or now? Dr. Ellen Madison's neighborhood. It's a tough question.
That is a tough question. I love living in Dunn's Corners. I love living on the family farm. I sometimes miss
The simplicity.
the unity, a sense of community, because that has gone.
Yeah.
That whole sense of community has gone. And I watched things disappear. I watched Krebs burn down. I watched Romanella Gravel Bank be replaced by a housing development. I watched the filling station being torn down and the mobile station built. I watched the community house disappear and the new fire station appear. I watched Pine Lodge Cabins become a motel and condos. I watched Charlie's disappear and Blue Moon Tea Room disappear. And now we have Walmart. Of course, I loved Benny's because you could get anything at Benny's. There are places that haven't changed that much. South Woody Hill Road still has a lot of the people on it, the Dinwoodies and so forth, that I grew up with or that I remember.
I think Mr. Steiner's family's still there.
Yeah, Mr. Steiner's family is still there, Dan and Michelle. People have discovered South Woody Hill Road because of the management area. There's a lot of hiking and biking and stuff going on. And then I had a transaction with the land trust and gave them, I sold, I didn't give, my grandparents' house lot and the field. So now people are enjoying that, and I love that. I love looking out my window and seeing people walking their dogs and stuff.
So Ellen Madison today, what would you share with our viewers as your philosophy, your secret to life?
I guess I have several. I think you have to keep learning and being curious about things and sharing your knowledge, as I'm doing with you, of things that other people might not know. And I think the whole program that the Historical Society is doing with documenting what Westerly was like by having real life people talk with you and so forth is so valuable. I think that being curious about things, there are still things that you learn every day, and I forget them very quickly, but I learn them, you know? And I think my proudest achievement is now, at this stage in my life, collecting people. I love to collect people, and the bed and breakfast allowed me to do that for 42 years. I had that bed and breakfast. But to collect people and then connect them and find, like I found the weaver for the loom to be redone, and I couldn't, people will call with questions, and if I don't know the answer, I can connect to them with somebody who does. And I treasure that skill. I hope I never lose it. I'm trying to make a lot of younger friends because my own classmates are dying, you know. But I think that being curious and continually learning is extremely important.